and I wrote this piece specifically for this reading and Carissa. It's a memoir. It's titled, Where Did My Balls Go? The story of Oliver. If you looked at the website, you saw in my photo my muse. He's a poodle. Part 1, the beginning. I never knew my father, and my mother was a tired old bitch by the time she gave birth to me. After years of breeding, her womb was exhausted, and she barely had time for me. My litter was a small one, only my brother Newton and myself. And yet I never knew the joys of my mother's milk. My name back then was Mr. Peabody, a moniker that never quite fit my persona. But I will get to this in due time. We were allowed to sleep next to our mother only one day before we were taken to another part of the puppy farm. I still have separation anxiety and a deep filial attachment to my human mommies. The farm was a large expanse of green space located in northern Pennsylvania. It is important to note, however, that the only thing grown there was puppies. We were never allowed inside the big house, but rather relegated to our dark, cold quarters in the barn. Our beds were piles of damp straw, and water dripped on our noses from the leaks in the ceiling as we slept. I was born in September, and so mosquitoes and horseflies were abundant on the farm, and I often woke up with large welts covering my paw pads. To this day, I still have no desire to return to that awful, landlocked state. I love you, Carissa, Randolph, and Pepe. Newton and I never fit in with the other puppies on the farm. Our mother was a poodle, but we never knew what our father was or where he came from, and we felt a hereditary absence within ourselves. But none of the puppies seemed to know their fathers, and I've often wondered whether or not we all perhaps shared the same father or the same few fathers, studs whose only purpose was virility. No matter, it was made clear that Newt and I were the only two puppies on the farm without papers. That is, we were not purebred. Nobody liked us. The other puppies, the purebred Bichon Frises, or white devils, as Newton named them, would steal our food and hide our only luxury at the farm, one milk-bone biscuit per week from us, and ran circles around us, taunting us with names like poo-poo poodle and half-breed bastard. I never understood this insult. We were all bastards at that farm. There were other puppies on the farm, a small litter of 3 golden retrievers, who never hurt us directly. Rather, they would watch from the sidelines as the Bichon puppies tormented us, silent, complicit. Needless to say, Newton and I were relieved to learn that we were not only leaving the puppy farm, but leaving together. Part 2, I lose a part of myself. The drive to upstate New York was long and tiresome. Newton and I were caged in separate crates in the back of a large sports utility vehicle. I could hear Newton whimpering and vomiting in the corner of his crate. Long car rides did not agree with him, and I was powerless to help him. "Hang in there, baby brother," I whispered to him, making sure to keep my voice low so the driver, a teenage young man with greasy hair and spots all over his face, was his father a Dalmatian, would not yell at us to hush. Our first vision of him quickly smote any hope of a better life in New York. "I'm scared," Newton whispered back to me, shifting around in his crate to avoid having to sleep in his own filth. When we finally arrived at yet another farm, a small blonde woman greeted us, yelling at what I presumed to be her son for not cleaning up after Newton. We were picked up, still in our crates, and carried to a garage behind her house. She set the crates down on a table, let us out, and held us up in front of her face. "Hello, Newton. Hello, Mr. Peabody." Her voice was raspy, but not without tenderness. She smelled like aged cheese and lavender. Then she set us down on the floor in a pen, a larger space, but another cage nonetheless. There were 2 other puppies in the pen, minuscule terriers whose white fur reminded us of our violent past. They were sisters huddled around their bowl of raw meat, and they left us alone. The blonde woman then gave Newton and I our own bowl of raw meat, and we ate ravenously, caring little for how impolite we were being. She left the garage, turning off the light as she walked out. And thus, Newton and I were alone again. The terrier slept together in a crate on the opposite side of the pen, our bellies full of raw hamburger, and our bodies and minds exhausted from the long trip. The garage was cold, and the concrete floor sent shivers through my body. The next morning, one of the terriers took tentative steps toward Newton and I, and then sat down. In a hushed voice, she said, "It's going to happen to you too." We asked her what she was talking about, and she snapped at us, demanding that we keep our voices down. "She'll hear you," she warned us. When we asked the terrier what her name was, she told us it didn't matter, that no one stayed here for long. Her voice was ominous and her words cryptic, and Newton began to cry. The terrier then rolled over onto her back and showed us her lower abdomen. A long pink scar and a black tattoo of numbers and letters decorated her haunches. "What is that?" I asked her. "Neither my sister nor I know," she said. "The blonde woman came in and took us, her first and then me, to another room where we got a shot. Then all went black. When I woke up, I was back in this pen with no memory, only these marks on my body and an empty feeling in my tummy." I was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. A few hours later, the blonde woman came back with a clipboard and another woman. "Those two," she said, pointing at Newton and myself. The other woman, who was wearing blue latex gloves, walked over and picked my brother and I up. We were then carried to another building behind the house and put in yet another pen. "What is happening to us?" Newton asked, visibly shaking. In the room adjacent to where we were being held captive, I heard the blonde woman say, "We'll do the little one first." Newton also heard this and began to cry. Keep in mind, I was the first to come out when we were born. Before I could console him, the women came to our pen and took him away from me. I jumped up on top of my crate so that I could see what they were doing to Newton. For a long time, I couldn't talk about what I witnessed in that brightly lit room in upstate New York. But now I'm here to tell you, to warn you, so that you may never go through the tragedy that was my young life. Just like the terrier had said, they pulled out a syringe filled with a clear liquid and stuck a very long needle into Newton's shoulder blades. He yelped when the needle penetrated his skin, but then he grew very woozy and laid down, as though to take a nap. The blonde woman then took out a black metallic object that made a buzzing sound, an electric razor. They were shaving Newton's haunches, moving dangerously close to his penis. I was next, I kept thinking, and fought the urge to cover my eyes. There were knives and scalpels and all sorts of other surgical tools arranged on a cloth next to Newton's lifeless body. There was also another needle, though this one buzzed just like the razor, and a pot of black ink. I understood that this was for the tattoo I understood that this was for the tattoo that the terrier had shown us. Why would they want to mark us, I wondered. And couldn't they mark us with something more aesthetically pleasing than a row of numbers and letters? I took a deep breath and fought the urge to vomit. I was so scared. The woman in the blue gloves then made an incision right below Newton's penis and took something wet and pink out of his body. I strained my eyes so that I could figure out what was going on, and then it hit me. They took Newton's balls. They took Newton's balls, and they were going to take mine. Before I could devise my escape plan, the blonde woman walked into the pen and picked me up. I tried to move away from her, but I was paralyzed with fear. The next thing I remember is getting pricked with the needle and then a black cloud blurring my vision. When I woke up, my belly hurt and the skin around my tattoo was sore. I could barely stand, let alone walk or run away. I was back in the first pen with Newton. The two white terriers were gone, and the one sister's words echoed inside of my head. No one stayed here for very long.